How do you build a high-performing culture? This is Culture Architects. Candid conversations with extraordinary leaders sharing their biggest successes, failures, and lessons learned on their culture journeys. Here's David J. Friedman.
A few months ago, a mutual friend introduced me to a really fascinating guy named Brian Cali. We had such a fun and I think really interesting conversation that I asked him to be my guest on the podcast. So today on Culture Architects, we're joined by Brian. As you're going to learn, he's a molecular biologist, he's an entrepreneur, he's an investor, and he was a co-founder of a pharmaceutical company called Ironwood Pharmaceuticals. It was a company that built life-saving medicines. He's also a true culture architect, which is why we have him here. And as you're going to hear, the lessons that he learned in 2 decades at Ironwood continue to shape how he approaches his game-changing work today. So Brian, welcome to the Culture Architects podcast.
Thank you so much, David. I have to laugh just as we're starting. The sun has come out and shone on my face.
It's like, it's a halo. It's a halo.
Yeah, exactly, right.
That means something, I'm sure.
Something for sure.
Yes.
Exactly.
So for our audience sake, I always like to go back. You've heard some of our other podcasts. I always like to, for the audience, kind of go back to a little bit of history. And just so people understand your background, how did you get into like science? I remember reading somewhere about a science fair that you participated in, and that led to some things. So share that story with us.
Yeah. I think for a long time, I thought I really wanted to be a physician. And I had, and I wouldn't say a long time, I mean, really like from the time that I was 7 or 8 years old, I admired the folks that I knew who were physicians. It was a really interesting thing. And I wasn't thinking about it all that hard. I had an amazing a chemistry teacher in high school, and that chemistry teacher, Mr. Warner, he went out of his way. I was in orchestra in high school. This would have been right before junior year, and it was my sophomore year. And Mr. Warner showed up when I was in rehearsal at orchestra one day and said, "Pulled me out." He said, "I need to talk to you," and he said, I wanted you to know that you've been, I don't know what your plans were for the summer, but I've had you selected to do cancer research at Roswell Park Memorial Institute in Buffalo, New York. I was growing up in Albany, New York. So, and he said, it's a full ride. Like you can go and you'll have this amazing summer experience, which first of all, just like pause for a second. Like It's incredible. I didn't even know anything about it. And he had said, he saw something in me or whatever. And myself and one other student from my high school went out to do this program. It's important relative to the Ironwood story. So like, we'll get there. But, anyway, that was the place that really, I went out to Roswell Park and I did cancer research, and I would walk through the surgical wings where patients had been, and it was particularly facial surgeries, where they'd had tumors removed, and the physicians would sort of reconstruct and give them back their dignity through that. And I was really amazed by that and the opportunity. So then I'm thinking maybe some sort of a surgeon would be the right thing. And then, honestly, through that summer, I absolutely fell in love with research. I loved the idea that we would go after the root cause of disease and be able to tackle it and think how transformative that could be. So it was really, I would say, high school that really got me lit up about that idea.
Now, I'm sure there are plenty of youth who at some point, discover research and think, okay, yeah, maybe I'd really like to go into that. I like science or whatever. But they don't all start pharmaceutical companies. So like, that's different. So what led to, okay, you and some others saying, I think, maybe we're not just going to do research. We're going to create a company to do this.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I'm going to roll forward from Roswell Park. So what you need to know about that is that there were 50 kids from around the country, and 48 kids had independent science projects. And there were 2 kids that were paired up, and that was me and another guy named Todd Milne. And so Todd and I shared a research project together. We collaborated throughout the summer. We presented together at the end of the summer on our project. And then we lost touch because we were 16 years old, and that's what happens. And then I went to undergraduate, and then I went to graduate school. And I'm making I absolutely, no question, like I am going to be a research scientist. I am going to be a professor. That's what I am going to do with absolute certainty. I was absolutely on that track. I had job offers at the end of my graduate program. It was like, it was perfect. But in my field of research, you do a postdoctoral fellowship afterwards. So I went to MIT, at the Whitehead Institute, affiliated with MIT afterwards. And I walked in the first day, and I had a baymate with me in my little laboratory. And guess who that was? That was Todd Milne, who I'd known from when I was 16, was my baymate. And
now,
so,
had you even spoken to him between the time you were 16 and then?
He'd written letters, and it was before email. So like I was a terrible letter writer. So there were some exchanges and then nothing. And then when I was looking at graduate schools, we both had looked at Harvard. He actually ended up going there. I decided to go to Wisconsin, but they people had said, this guy Todd Milne has left a note for you. So like he knew, and I knew where he was a little bit, but really no, like we had no real contact with each other. And I say all of this because I think as we go further into this and into the founding of the company and how I look at things in general, like relationships matter a lot. And so, so I will say there was Todd in that bay. And then I walked into the next bay over, and a person that I had really liked when I looked at Berkeley as another school that I was potentially going to go to graduate school with. My host for Berkeley was in the next bay over, and his name was Peter Hecht. And so, and Peter was really the instigator. Again, we were sailing right towards professorships. There was no plan to start a company. And Peter kept asking, like, because he was going to start a company. And so, so he was the one that really pushed the idea, well, maybe we could do something different. And it was not part of what I wanted to do, I will tell you, but he's a persuasive person.
So the three of you decided we're going to start this company.
Yeah, that's right. There was one other guy, Eric Summers, who was also involved. I didn't have quite the connection to Eric that I did to the others of those. So yeah, we did. We started talking about ideas and things that we were discovering in the laboratory at the Whitehead Institute that seemed like it had relevance to human disease on the one hand, and actually like antifungal drugs, like things that could be good agents for infectious disease. And so we started to put that together and think about how could that be something where we might be able to put a company together. Yeah. And
so fast forward that a number of years, and that company really grew. And ultimately, how many people were in that company?
Well, so at its peak, Ironwood grew to just about 1,000 people.
Wow.
So it started with 4 founders. When we opened our doors, we were 13. And, I was thinking about this a little bit before this chat, that, at every doubling of the company, there's a cultural transformation that's happening. Like, I think it was one company that I spent, on its arc, and then we spun out 3 companies from it. But like, on its arc, I probably worked for 6 really different companies. Like, we were developing culture for different scales, and there's opportunities and challenges in each of those. So
yeah, that's fascinating.
So about 1,000 people to answer your specific question. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And it's a great segue into where I want to go. And so
great.
In the earliest stages, so we'll call it stage 1, it's, 4 up to 13, maybe you're growing to 30, 40, 50, 60 people. That's a very different company, to your point, than a company of 100 or 500 or 1,000. So when you were starting that, did all 4 of you have this view that relationships and people really matter? Or was that one of you that was particularly strong about that? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I would say it's foundational to why we even got together. So we all cared about it. For me, much of the decision, actually, this is going to sound funny, but like much of the decision to do this rather than accept a professorship and go someplace else was, I realized about myself that I really loved team-based work. We had opportunities to collaborate within the laboratory, and the opportunity to actually form a culture with a group of people that I had mutual intellectual and personal trust with was incredible. I never would have taken at that time a job in biotech or large pharma straight out of my postdoc. That was not anything I intended to do. The option was really go be a professor or start this company. And it was really about, I had a lot of trust and I think we all cared a lot about the fact that we could create a company that would, have a culture that we enjoyed being in and were proud of, and would be a bit of a legacy. So, although I don't think we were thinking about legacy then, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, and some of those things are, in retrospect, we realize.
Yeah.
I think about in my first company, which was an employee benefits consulting company called RSI, and we built this amazing culture that led to the work that I do today. And I always talk about the 8-step framework which is how we organize the steps to build a great culture. But I wasn't doing an 8-step framework then. It was in retrospect, as I thought about, well, what did we do? Well, we did this or we did this. Well, I guess we did these 8 things, and that became the 8-step framework. So there's a lot of things that we learned that we realized in retrospect that we didn't know up front. But I'm curious about the 4 of you had this, as you're describing, you all had this, I'll call it a priority for, you wanted to build something really special and the relationships really mattered. I'm guessing, but I'm curious from your perspective, is that I'm guessing that would be pretty different, that most, this is a real stereotypical thing, so I could be totally wrong here, but I'm envisioning that most scientifically oriented people, we picture scientists as being maybe a little dry, a little less relationship oriented, a little more empirical about things. And so I would imagine that most biotech companies or pharmaceutical companies would not be as relationship oriented as the 4 of you were choosing to be. Is that accurate, or is that not necessarily true?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that your characterization of scientists, I'll just say, are, they're a high proportion of scientists are introverts. Yes, that is true. The industry, though, of course, attracts, especially in biotech and especially, starting companies, is people who love science but are oriented towards, transforming the human experience through bringing them better medicines. And so there's an immediately like a mission connection in there, and definitely an appreciation. More and more, science is very team based, and so. So no, I wouldn't want to say that was exceptional or different about us, but it definitely was very early on a super intentional aspect of our company. And I do, I've served on a few different boards, and the boards that I'm attracted to are with companies who are also very clear about the culture that they are. I will use your phrase, architecting, and that matters a lot to me. I've seen that be also a successful path for them. So, in recruiting,
is the origin of your focus on culture? It sounds like largely around the recognition of we're going to have to work together as a team, and if we're going to work, we're going to produce the best results if we work as a team and collaborate. And the best way for us to work as a team and collaborate is if we built a certain kind of culture. Is that an accurate way of describing where it comes from, or is that too limited perhaps?
I don't know that it's limited. I would add something to it, which is, and if I were just describing it de novo, what I would say is I love and enjoy watching teams of people do great things. Like it's just, it's so amazing to be about it. And I will say, there was a point like 4 years into the company. And again, just to give you a general sense of things, like we started in 1998, and, we didn't go public until 12 years after that. So we were a private company for a long time. And then there was like a 9-year run where I was still with the company, where it was a public company. But about 4 years in, and we had undergone, we started out on certain paths, and then certain things didn't work, and we pivoted, and we, sort of figured out how to transform our skills and bring in the right people to help us move. But around 4 years, I said to Peter Hecht, who's the CEO, the 3 of us were still there, Todd, Mill, and Peter and I were talking. And I said, I love working through these things with this group of people, but it could almost be an ice cream shack. Like it doesn't matter what it is. It's like doing it with a group of people that are all trying to get to the same place and are, they all are ambitious as all get out, but they also are not ambitious to at the cost of people around them. Like I love that idea. That changed, by the way, when we had our first drug, when we really had clinical results that showed that we could impact patient suffering and change people's lives in that way. That helped me realize that there's something else about being in biotech that I knew and would have said, but I never felt it in the way that I did when we actually, something we had invented had gone in and changed people. But the undercurrent of all of that is, watching and helping teams of people pull off ambitious things, and the pride that they get from that and everything that comes from that is wonderful.
When you mentioned that, we could have been an ice cream shop or something else. What the thought that went through my mind as you were saying that is I'm thinking about, I think it was one of Jim Collins's books. I don't remember if it was Good to Great or Built to Last or one of those, where my memory at least is that he talked about, and I had this experience too, that the companies that are incredibly successful over a long period of time, it isn't that they do, and particularly I think he talked about companies are successful through periods of chaos too, that they're successful, as I remember, not because they did a better job anticipating what changes would occur and making the right moves, but they built the right team. And the team was smart enough and capable enough and collaborative enough that we'll figure it out. And I remember,
absolutely.
I remember in my first company, that benefits company I was describing, RSI, when I was late in that phase of my career, it sounds funny when I think about it, but healthcare was under enormous pressure. And I laugh at that because nothing's changed in 20 or 30 years since then.
Exactly.
And we were all convinced that the entire industry was going to change and maybe there was going to be national healthcare and all this other stuff. Yeah. And I remember thinking at the time, like, okay, what's our response to that? Because it could fundamentally change how our business is run.
Yeah.
And my point of view, much like yours, was, what? I built a great leadership team. We had wonderful people that were really smart and worked really well together. And whatever happens, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out something to do because we got a great group of people and we'll make it work. It wasn't so much about we're going to be smarter than everybody else in anticipating what was going to happen.
That's right.
And it sounds like similar to your experience with that.
Absolutely. And I will add on to that to say, when we, somewhere along where we were having some successes fairly far out, I was having a conversation with one of my venture investors that invested in our earliest rounds, who had been with us all the way through, actually stayed all the way for, 18 years with us in different forms. They had exits and things along the way, but he stayed on as a board member. His name is Terry McGuire from Polaris Partners. And I was saying, Terry, what was it like when, after our first round of funding and before the second, like everything that you'd invested in, like none of it was working. Like, how did it feel for you? And he said, Brian, like the way that I have done well over all of my years is I invest in people and and I trusted you guys to figure out. And that's what we were putting our money behind. He said that the ideas were attractive and there were important things, but like most of the time we expect that what we're investing in won't work. And we're expecting people to figure it out, and we're looking for people who can. So, so just to echo your point,
really interesting. That's fascinating. It makes a lot of sense to me,
right?
And I could see that ultimately, you put smart people together, and they'll figure stuff out.
Yeah, that's why I only have so much patience for long-term strategic plans, because it's like it's great. I mean, you absolutely need a strategy, and we should be looking forward, but we need to be prepared to completely pivot because the world changes.
Yeah.
And some things that we think are going to change don't change, just like you said.
Well, and I think that's an interesting point. Beyond the world changing, some things that we thought would work don't work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. That antifungal drug that I talked about doesn't work. Like it was not a good idea. But we didn't know until we did the science that it was a bad idea. Yeah.
That's interesting. So you referred to before how the company changed over these different periods as the company grew, and it was a different company at different sizes. Yeah. So what was the first thing, if you can remember, what was the first thing you saw that caused you to say, this is different now. We need to do some things differently from a people standpoint. We're bigger than we used to be, and the impact of that is X. And now we need to do some things differently. What did you see that helped you to notice this is different?
Good. Interesting question. And we could go further. Let me try the first one that comes to mind, and you can say, no, I want to do more. Okay. So the first one that comes to mind is actually very early on. We're 15 people, and we need to decide by consensus, because that's the way we had chosen we were going to run this early company. We were very flat structure wise. Like, we'd hired just really terrific scientists who were all signed on for this mission, and we were going to figure things out, and we got it. So we had a meeting. It's very apropos of tomorrow being Veterans Day. That about what our company holiday should be, and it was a discussion that literally took 6 hours with the entire company debating the relative merits of what was then Columbus Day, which we would now know as Indigenous Peoples Day, versus Veterans Day versus another thing. And we went on. And at the end of that meeting, I remember looking at Peter and I said, if we don't figure out how to run effective meetings, we're done. And
Yes.
so I went out. There's a group called Interaction Associates, which I really think a lot of are at, who runs, facilitative meetings and, making meetings work and all of that stuff. And so we got schooled very quickly on that around consensus versus other modes of decision making, having responsible, accountable, RACI diagrams, like all that kind of stuff early on. And so, I would say that was the earliest moment where I was like, we're dead in the water if we're going to do this. Like, yeah.
This doesn't work at scale.
It just sounds so ridiculous. No, very much not. Very much.
Yes.
Not. Yeah.
So as you continue to grow, what's the next major dividing point that you'd say, let me ask it this way first.
Yeah.
I think in terms of number of people, because I think number of people relates to organizational complexity, where lots of people talk about, well, it was a $50 million company, 100 million. I don't care. Like, how many people do we have here?
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the next break point in organizational complexity that you observed that you said, we're a different company than we used to be?
Yeah. I do think 26 is different than 13, but probably like around 50 people was another place where, and around that time, we didn't, although I told you that I loved team-based work, et cetera, we wouldn't have described ourselves. We were not thinking of ourselves as a culture-based company. But, there were all kinds of things, ways of working, et cetera, that really mattered to us. And as we'd been through a few cycles of both adding people to the company and now starting to really be more diligent about linking, performance to compensation, for example, we started to realize that there was this underlying element going on that we had not articulated well. And that was, we were rewarding people both on what they did and how they did it, but we were not intentional in articulating what our expectations around how were. And we had someone join the company who said, two things, like, you guys should really read Built to Last and Good to Great, because I think it would resonate with you. And secondly, there's some elements in here where we might want to be a little more explicit about some of our performance expectations. And so we always thought goals were enough, right? Like we had corporate goals around achieving X, Y, and Z. But then we would get in the room to review people and we'd be like, well, knocked it out of the park on these things, leaving just like people disenfranchised and frustrated all around them. Well, we can't give them a full score for that, and so then you'd come back and you'd say that. And of course, it's the right thing to do. But the wrong thing to do is to not be clear about what you want from someone beforehand. So, we started to get more serious about that. And to in the trajectory of our conversation where you're saying as companies get bigger and bigger, it started with simply that, where we said, okay, we have what and how, and we're going to evaluate people on a what and how dimensions, both, and they're going to know that they both matter. And at the time they were equally weighted. And that was where we started. And then we got a little more detailed about what how meant. And by the time we were 500 people, we had success factors that were delineated in something that someone could read a book, a little mini chapter on around what the success factors at Ironwood looked like, and our performance evaluations and goal setting had elements of both of those. So it was much more intentional at that point. But
I love that. What I love particularly about that, and maybe I love it because it mirrors my own path, but what I love is the way this evolved in a sort of organic, natural way. What I'm hearing was, it wasn't so much that somebody said, all right, you need to do culture and here's how you do it, but it was like, we realized that we're not being very clear with what our expectations are. So it would make a lot of sense if we documented that. And then we got to do, and similar to my experience of just realizing, if I want people to work well together, well, maybe I should explain to them what that looks like. And teach that stuff over and over again so that it becomes second nature.
Exactly right.
So it's coming from that recognition of something missing, and then you created something to fill that gap. And
That's right. That's
what we call architecting.
Right. There we go. Perfect. Yeah. There was, what you just said made me think of one other thing too, which is we were intentional about one element as well. We were intentional about not hiring a head of HR. And Peter would remember exactly when. I think we were probably 70 people by the time we hired someone that we would have called an HR director in that case. And the intentionality of that was because we had seen in other companies, people abdicating culture actually, and like everything, like if there's anything related to having, challenging conversations with somebody about performance or setting goals or all that stuff, like they'll turf it to the HR director and, then the manager doesn't have to deal with that. And that was like, no, like we want all of our leaders and all the people who work there to be competent at having conversations with each other about these things. HR can augment, HR can take over a lot of operations, but we need to build this culture, and everyone who's coming along needs to be part of that in this way. And so that was an intentional piece, even as we were founding our way along around how to implement pieces. So
I love that. So our producer Rolando and I were talking about this earlier today, but I'm curious about, along the way in almost every company, they at some point in time have one or more team members who are particularly good at their job function. They're good at the what, but not the how.
Yeah, totally.
To use your language. In most non-scientific companies, those are usually salespeople who produce a lot of business, and they have important customer relationships, but they're just jerks. And they're really violators of the culture. And every company struggles with, when do you get rid of those people? And they feel held hostage by those. And my experience is that, in non-technical companies, those are usually salespeople. In technical companies, they're usually a technician. And so I'm imagining, but I'm curious your point of view about this, or history of it. I'm imagining that somewhere along the line, you've had some scientists who are brilliant scientists who, oh my God, this guy or woman could really add a lot of value here. Yeah. And yet the how portion of their work was pretty darn bad. And you were faced with the struggle of, if they're never going to change, do we get rid of this person? Yeah. And how can we let go of this scientist who's so smart and so capable? Yeah. Tell me about, one or more of those stories that you've had.
Yeah. I want to
without naming names
and roles. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Maybe I will just vehemently agree with you. And I was expecting at some point what you might ask me is like, what's the most challenging thing about navigating culture in companies? And honestly, I would say it is being able to hold everyone accountable to what you have agreed will be the critical elements of what and how. And the hardest ones are exactly what you said, which is you've got someone who's knocking it out of the park on what, and their how is toxic, frankly. And I would say, one of our challenges over time was acting swiftly enough on those. I think we all came into this orientation that like all people have the opportunity, all people can grow, all people can change, all people can get information and go. And we, especially early on, I would say over-indexed on that belief to the point of like, there's damage left in the wake of someone like that. And so I guess I won't go into like names of people, but what I will say is that the only thing I might dissuade us of is the notion that it's technical, but like I've seen it across the board. Like, like there can be, not that we had lots and lots of this, but like they can show up in different places. They could be in legal, they could be in operations, they could be in quality assurance, and the further up they are in the organization, the more damage they can cause and the more quickly, therefore, it must be acted upon with probably a little less leeway around opportunities for growth. They're never easy, though. Never easy.
No. Well, I would add two things to that. One is I would agree with you that the further up they go, the more the potential damage. I would also say the stronger the message you just sent to everybody else, the further up they go.
Exactly right.
If they're not that important to the company, it doesn't send much of a message. You get rid of somebody who everybody knows is pretty darn important to this company and you're willing to sacrifice them. You just told people we're not kidding about this.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think the one other thing I would say on the other side of some of those actions is, because I want to reframe what we just talked about. Like there are some jerks. Most people are not, honestly. Most people they have competencies and they have things that maybe they're not as good at or they don't value. And more often than not, it was a values mismatch rather than, and it like numerous instances as I'm thinking about this right now, There were people, oftentimes it was me. I let them go. In that conversation, I was clear about the things that maybe were not, not working and not a fit. And oftentimes those people went and did something else that was a different kind of role where they're thriving. Like there's somebody that I'm thinking of right now who went off and started a consulting business that's absolutely thriving because they're great in that format of interacting with people as opposed to necessarily, leading teams within a larger organization. They're killing it. Like it's fantastic. I'm thrilled for them. We're still in touch. Like it's not animosity. So anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you're making because we sometimes describe this in more black and white terms.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not that simple.
No.
And it is to your point. It's not about somebody being a good or bad person.
That's right.
Sometimes those toxic people are jerks. But more often than not, it's more just, are they a fit in this company? Or to your point, are they fit in this role that maybe there's a different role for them?
Right. Exactly right. Exactly.
And I two things that I talk about all the time in my workshops, one that you referred to is in my early days, you said you over-indexed on it. In a similar way, I used to think I was so good, I was going to change people. I was going to coach them out of all their shortcomings, or all their ways in which they weren't how I wanted them to be. And if I just gave them better coaching, they would be different. Right. And I learned early, it works, but rarely. It's very rare that it can work. More often than not, they're fully formed humans, and we're not going to change a lot of that.
That's right. That's right. And your job is to assemble a team that in collective has all the strengths it needs to be good.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And the other thing that I would add to our conversation on this theme of sort of grayness that I often like to point out to people is, to be fair, I would put up with more in a role that's really difficult to find than in a role that I could replace easily.
Yeah.
So, and that doesn't mean anything goes, but in a role that's very difficult to find in the real world, yes, sometimes we gonna have to figure out, well, can I shift how they interact with people, or have them working at home more than in the office, or whatever.
Right. That's right.
Because that role is so hard to find. We're in a different role that I could replace like that. I'm not going to put up with much.
Right.
So again, that doesn't mean anything goes, or that people can flaunt or disregard the things that we've agreed upon how we're going to operate our house. But there's some grayness there. And
you're acknowledging a business reality. Yeah, exactly. And I think what you're saying is also just know that you are doing that.
Yes.
Be intentional.
That's a conscious.
Think about ways to insulate around that in ways that will do less damage than if you just put your head down and ignore it.
Yes, exactly.
For the period of time that you're doing this. Yeah,
exactly. And I love your point that it's different to say, I am consciously making that decision, and this is how we're going to handle it, versus, well, could we just ignore this?
That's right.
There's a difference between making a choice about that.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is, whenever I hear someone else describe this role is irreplaceable, this person is so special, I will push them hard on that.
Yes.
Because how many are there really that are like, it's really just that person, right? So,
well, another way of thinking about that. There's a coach that I did some work with that one of my favorite coaching questions he ever asked me is, I was stuck on a point of view about how something had to be done. And he asked me the question, well, what if you couldn't do that? Yeah. And just that question forced me to think, well, I'd have to come up with a different way. And so in a similar way, when we think that person is there, well, what if they left? Yeah. You'd have to replace them. Or what if they had to buy the proverbial truck? You wouldn't have a choice. You'd have to do something.
Right.
So it can't be that they're irreplaceable, because this might not be even your choice.
That's right. And remarkably, sometimes you will find that the people that were in that organization further down might rise up and do things that surprise you in some amazing ways. And you've created opportunity for that. So
yes.
And that, but it all, to your point, it all takes courage, right?
It does.
And some level of investment, and I don't want to say faith, but a little bit of that. It's faith in your team, faith in your abilities as a group to problem solve around an issue.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and one of the things I would add to that I have seen in my career, and I'm sure you've seen this, is the more times you've overcome those kinds of challenges, or any kind of challenges for that matter, the more organizational confidence you build that we can deal with this. Yes, we thought that was going to be so challenging. You know what? We figured it out. And so in a similar way, I have found this to be true. And interestingly, almost always when I think of my own experiences and the many, many companies we've worked with, when they finally created or developed the courage, demonstrated the courage to make that difficult decision, almost none of the things they feared took place.
Yes, right, exactly.
The rest of the staff did step up, or they hired somebody new who was actually better than the person they thought was irreplaceable.
Right,
or
exactly.
The customers we thought we were going to lose don't leave. And then we're kicking ourselves thinking, oh, darn, I should have done this a long time ago.
Right, exactly.
But you do that enough times, you develop an organizational confidence that we can deal with stuff. We have overcome things before.
Yeah, exactly.
And that makes a difference. So you built this great company. Love how intentional you were about building that culture.
Yeah.
As I follow your career path, somewhere along there, you said, you know what? I've been here long enough. It's time for me to move on to whatever's next in Brian Cali's career.
Yeah.
So what was happening that caused you to say, I think I'm ready for my next challenge? And tell me about that.
Yeah. So we as Ironwood, so a little bit of history, like the company was originally called Microbia. It had those things that I told you that we were doing. It matured. We went public. We had another piece of our business. We sold that. We spun it out and then it was bought. That was not drug related. And then in 2019 or so, we realized that our company was really becoming two different companies. We had a therapeutics business focused on gastrointestinal diseases and our leading product that was growing to be a blockbuster. And then we had this other set of assets that were unrelated to that. The science had led us in a certain direction that was different than all the gastrointestinal diseases. And so we decided to spin out a company from Ironwood that would be this new ongoing entity. And I led the sort of the financing for that and the strategy around that with the team. I wouldn't say the strategy, but like all the implementation of it. It was an incredible amount of work to separate a company and do it as a public company. Like it was very challenging. It was a lot of fun. I learned a ton of things. We got that company launched. But I knew right sort of in the middle of that process that I was about a year from really needing to just take a break. And, my wife, who is a wonderful person. We've been together since we were freshmen in college, but like she, through all of the things I just talked about, scaling a company to 1,000 people and everything else, never once said, maybe you're working too much, or maybe we were a partner. We'd figured stuff. We'd raised 3 kids together. Like around this split, she said, you really this is very unbalanced. And I listened to her and I was like, oh yeah, that's interesting. And I knew. So basically I decided that at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, I was going to take a sabbatical and it would be a 9-month break. And I'd gotten good advice from a friend that said, that's what you should do. Stiff arm everybody who calls you for a period of time. You pick your date and then just don't talk to anybody because you'll get distracted and you'll jump into the next thing. I know you. And long story short, I did that. I was shocked by the outcome, which was that at 9 months, I was asking for a little more time, but it was because I was realizing that as things got a little quieter, pandemic notwithstanding and all the other things that happened in 2020, my brain was spending more and more time thinking about climate and climate change and the clean energy transition than full-time operating a biotech company. And so, so I needed more time to process that. But I needed a bit of a break. I took a break and then surprising things happened in that break. And now I'm spending much more of my time in climate and just a little bit of time in biotech.
So when you talk about, it's interesting to me. I had a similar break when I sold my first company. It was about 9 months before I wrote my first book and went to the rest of the stuff. So, and I'd gotten similar advice too about just taking some time and not rushing into anything because the world will look different to you.
Yes, that's right.
Some time and perspective and distance from where you were.
Right.
I'm curious about your comment when you said that at the end of 9 months, you felt like you needed some more time to process this stuff that you were thinking about around climate change and energy.
Yeah.
So what does that mean, like from a practical standpoint? Time to process, like what were you doing to process that? Or was you just allowing space? Like, what does that mean?
No. It wasn't just space. So I was reading a lot. I was saying yes to opportunities to get involved with like an energy board in the town that I live in Vermont to start to understand more about what the energy needs were in the community. It was just saying yes to lots of things that were in that space. But the overarching element in here was to really start to understand and maybe at some level overcome the insecurity of understanding what I might have to offer in something that was so orthogonal to what I had spent my entire career doing. So at some level, what I felt like I was, I'd built so much experience, credibility, know-how. I had all of the capital in biotech, right? Like that's where and if I wanted to go start another biotech company, like that was absolutely doable. And I'm talking about this other thing, which is like, I don't even know how I could be helpful. Like can I be helpful? And so it was processing that and then starting to, through saying yes, have some experiences that taught me, like I do know how I can be helpful here a little bit. And I may not get it perfect, but I have enough confidence to know that I will find a path here. I need to trust that. And that took another 6 months or so. And it took a little more time for me to change my LinkedIn profile that said I was a clean energy advocate, for example, right? Like, so it was just kind of shifting an entire mindset of myself, which then created opportunities. So that was, yeah.
So talk about what you're doing now.
Yeah.
In those areas.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I'm sort of most excited about and I'm proud of, it's something that we're really enjoying is, so I'm sitting right now in a 1782 farmhouse in Vermont that we retrofitted to net zero. And I've been working on that project. So another thing I did in that time was like, I worked on this house and there's something wonderful and tangible about doing that kind of work after working in an industry where it takes 10 years from an idea that you have to a product that you get, and 90% of the time they fail. Like that is literally what biotech is. And so, and by the way, hundreds of millions of dollars get invested along the way. And like, so it's all high stakes. And then it was like, okay, at the end of every day here, I can step back, look at a wall and say, built that wall, looks pretty good. Tomorrow I'm going to do X, right? So, so that was wonderful. But we created the place that we have done in part to use it as a way to build community and to one of the things that we do is we just a few weeks ago hosted our third, and we're going to do at least 2 a year climate retreats here, where we bring individuals somewhere between 6 and 12 to the place for a weekend experience where we help move people from, in most cases, it's people who are experiencing anxiety about climate change and don't really know. It feels like too big of an issue for them to engage in. And so we want to move them from anxiety or inaction to a place where they can actually engage with the work that needs to be done. And so, and there's a wonderful sort of construct for doing that was borrowed largely from Joanna Macy, an amazing environmentalist Buddhist scholar, and the work of Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who's an oceanographer who works on, and you'll appreciate this, David, like it's a climate Venn diagram, which is really about what am I good at, what needs doing, and what brings me joy. And finding the intersection of those three things is something that you could do that is sustainable to you and meaningful to what needs to be done. And so it's wonderful. We do this. We've had great intergenerational experiences happening from folks who are, early 20s to 70s. Some people are deeply already involved in the climate movement. Others are, preschool teachers who care but don't know what they can do, but they're amazing artists or some other thing. And like this work needs everybody. We need musicians and artists and scientists and engineers and financiers. And so this has been something that the next set of cohort of people, I've had a bunch of people reach out to me to participate in this next cohort, like amazing groups of people. Just really, it's super enjoyable. So
that's very cool.
Yeah.
And so as you envision the next coming years for you, is it mostly around helping others to see what they can do, or are you working on a new company or new initiatives on your own?
Yeah. So in parallel to all of that, I now am very active on the energy board here in Reading, and we had a town-owned solar array get done, and we're electrifying all the buildings in town by writing grants and getting money to be able to do that. So there's sort of a pieces of that I'm involved in, and the current thing that I'm really starting to get up on the curve on is workforce housing in Vermont. So we have a real shortage of housing that is clean, efficient, and affordable. And so that impacts who can live in what communities. And there are paths forward. And I've learned a lot about building, and I've built a lot of connections in the area, in the trades, people that I value tremendously. And so it's an area that I'm spending some real time on, is to think about through this work, are there people that I could collaborate with where we might be able to be doing some of that work as well? Very different than being a biotech.
Yes, it's completely different.
I understand it. And back to our earliest comment, like, I love working with groups of people who pull off ambitious things. And like even this project, which by the way, I blog about, and that's brought a lot of people who have been interested in sustainable building, et cetera, have reached out to me through the blog, which has been terrific. But it's about, I'm a big believer both in teams. So, I've got that team, maybe we can go do something over here. Wouldn't that be amazing? And I think in a way that is maybe a little antithetical to some of the other ways that I had come up through the industry and thought about, which was scaling. And it's sort of what you're asking now a little bit, to like, how will you scale your impact? I am accepting the idea of the ripple effect, and that I want to help activate others to go do their thing. I'm happy to train the trainers if they want to go organize retreats like this. Amazing. We're not doing this for profit. Like we want to get more people engaged and turned on to how they can engage. And so I really want to foster community building in lots of different ways. And so I suspect it'll be a lot more hyper local, but sharing the stories of those, because I have been inspired by others who tell their stories about what's possible. Yeah. And I think I want to do that. We could do that with a twist that would be appropriate for this part of Vermont, for example. Yeah.
Two comments I'd make just in listening to that. One, I'm thinking about, there's a consultant that I worked with over much of my career named Carter Schelling. And I met Carter when I was in my early 30s. And he taught me a lot about building business. And his whole reason for being for most of his career has been his view that he wants to help entrepreneurs grow their companies, sell them, and then use the skills that they learn to do something more meaningful in the world. Much as you're
really doing,
taking the skills that you learned and all the things you developed and saying, all right, now I have capabilities. How do I have a bigger impact in the world, or a different impact? You had a huge impact at first,
exactly.
A different impact in the world.
That's right.
Using the skills that I've developed.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. With no disparaging of, like, the career that I was in was about making medicines for people. Like it's incredibly mission driven work. Like, and I think what I was saying early on for me is that I only felt the true impact of that after actually I'd started a company that was more driven from culture than it became about that. But I think, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The other thing I'm thinking about when you talk about community building, when I think about the various things I've done around community, the single biggest thing that I've ever done that was the most rewarding and meaningful, it was an event. There's a company that is headquartered, I think, somewhere in upstate New York, and it might be Albany or somewhere up there. Have you ever heard of Robert Leathers?
No.
But I want to. Leathers, yes. So Robert Leathers, I think they're still around. I'm pretty sure they are. This goes back a number of years. But I think Robert Leathers was an architect, and he had this idea of building community playgrounds. So maybe you've seen these, where
Fantastic.
The whole idea was that you would, over a 5-day period, he would come to a community. We did this in my town. And so I was very active, and this goes back 25 years or some more. And they'd come in and work with schools and others to help pull from children the ideas that they wanted to build this amazing playground. And then over 3 days, you raise all the money, and over 3 days, the entire, like a barn raising, the entire community. We had hundreds of people serving food, people, everything that needed to be done to have several hundred people come together over 3 or 4 days and build a playground for the community. And it was so rewarding. It was the most fun thing I ever did in my career. It was really cool.
I love it. And just
really
hearing the
cool.
way you describe that and your voice, like exactly, like you understand,
Yes.
like, and so I appreciate and enjoy experiences like that as well. And
Yeah,
like
they're pretty
absolutely.
amazing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you know, what a time, right? Like we need this. We need this kind of opportunity for people. And there's difference. You know, there were different points of view and all kinds of things that showed up for that playground building. I'll bet you.
Yes.
But you came together in this common love for your community.
Yeah.
It gets hard to other people when you work alongside them and you're sharing ideas. And so there, you know, I just believe in there's so much more commonality amongst us than maybe we're feeling sometimes. So that's my way through. Love
that.
Opportunity.
Yeah. Well, Brian, this has been a fascinating conversation. Really, you and I could probably go for about 3 more hours on this.
Right.
But if people wanted to get to your blog, so connect with the material that you're doing, we'll put it in the show notes too, but just tell us where would they go for the blog?
Yeah, great. So it's at greendreamstories.com.
Okay.
So plural, greendreamstories.com. That's a Substack account. And the reason it's plural is it's my story now, but we're hoping to, and actually we'll launch one in I hope a month or two, someone else's story about their own transformation of a property, who are coming at it from a different perspective. They're younger folks. They're about 30 years old. They did it on a shoestring budget, and they've done amazing things. And that's a little different than this project. And so again, the idea is like, let's tell stories together. Let's find commonality so that we can both inspire each other and learn from each other. So greendreamstories.com, click on the Reading, Vermont part, and you'll get to my story.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you, Brian, so much. A great conversation.
David, I so much enjoyed being with you. Thank you for taking the time today, too.
My pleasure.
Take care.
And that wraps up today's episode of Culture Architects. If you're enjoying these conversations, subscribe on your favorite platform and also consider leaving a quick review, and that way other culture-minded leaders can find the show. And for more tools on building a high-performing culture in your organization, visit CultureWise.com. See you next time on Culture Architects.
This has been Culture Architects with David J. Friedman. Join us next time for more insights and wisdom from great leaders in all walks of life. To book David for your next event or to learn more about his writing, speaking, or consulting, go to davidjfriedman.com. Culture Architects with David J. Friedman is a production of CultureWise.